Be honest, when was the last time you went to a mall that had more than 5 people in it? The mall used to be the hotspot. Everybody and their mom was going to the mall. My mom was going to the mall. So this video is gonna be about the rise and then the eventual decline of the mall. But before we can talk about why they're declining and the various urbanism, urbanization, urbaniminal reasons for that, we have to talk about why they even exploded in the first place. It all began after World War II. Well, it didn't actually begin after World War II. It began much earlier than that. But the video is only 6 minutes long, and it's more convenient for me to say that. So I'm just gonna say that. I'm just gonna make that false claim. Anyway, it really did in a way begin after World War II. At the time, the United States was going through a great shift in its urban landscape. There were many different things at play. For example, the population growth after the baby boomers. Between 1940 and 1970, the suburban population grew from 17 million to 67 million people. That's a lot of people. And all these people, they needed a place to live. These new families needed a place to live. And so there was a migration, you could say, away from the cities and into suburbs. These people took advantage of the really cheap mortgages at the time, bought houses in suburbs. The suburbs became bigger and bigger. Another part was the construction of highways, which were led by the president at the time. He basically allocated a bunch of money to have these countrywide highways be put in place, connecting basically every large city in the United States. I'm sure you've been on one of these before. Anyway, that plus the enforced zoning laws that separated the residential area from the commercial area created a space that really encouraged the ownership of a car. All of these things combined, and the fact that these malls were often near highway intersections, that made them such perfect fits. These suburbs, they were really missing one thing. They had houses, they had schools, they had hospitals, but they didn't really have a true downtown. Like, they didn't have no major gathering places, no main streets, no plazas, no town centers, and it was very apparent. It was the mall that would eventually fill this void and become as popular as they are today. They were really a suburban civic space per se, a kind of climate-controlled indoor version of urban life. They were so popular, in fact, that the United States by 1990 had more than 1,500 enclosed shopping malls, which totaled nearly 5 billion square feet of retail space. They were an experiment in indoor urbanism. Their corridors functioned like streets. Their atriums were plazas. Their food courts acted like public squares. It really acted like a gathering space, which when you really look at it, the seeds of its decline were in its own DNA. One of these seeds or one of these problems would be isolation. These malls were designed for cars, not pedestrians. So unlike a real neighborhood, there were no through streets, no small blocks, no foot traffic spilling from surrounding the buildings. They were just destinations. They were not places that you passed by accident. In a way, the malls turned their back to the street. Their edges were blank walls and loading docks. They weren't part of the neighborhood. They were just islands surrounded by asphalt seas. The only activity that took place there was inside, never outside, never visible to the surrounding neighborhood, if they were even close to a neighborhood, that is. A real city, in comparison, thrives on permeability, on street life, and on small-scale interactions. Something that the mall concentrated indoors and not outside, visible to the community. So when the interior life faded, as it's doing now, there is no urban fabric for the mall to fall back on. Another one of the seeds that led to its decline is the changing social habits of today's society. The explosion of online shopping and the general change in consumer culture hit malls hard. They're no longer specific hangout spots because people do less shopping in person. In fact, by 2020, e-commerce accounted for nearly 16% of total US retail sales, up from just 0.8% in 2000. People no longer need a physical space to socialize or shop. As from an urbanist perspective, malls were an anti-city. They ignored several principles of good urban design. They ignored connectivity, mixed use, human-scale streets, and vibrant public space. While their interiors attempted to simulate plazas, the surrounding urban fabric was erased. Sidewalks vanished and neighborhood streets were cut off. The public, in quotations, spaces were privately owned with rules that limited civic activity, expression, and spontaneous interaction. Yet, the mall's decline is also a lesson. It reminds us that density, street grids, mixed use neighborhoods, and walkability are not just aesthetic preference. They are essential for resilient urban life. It's not all bad news though, as today many dead malls are being repurposed as urbanists see opportunity in their vast footprints. For example, Highland Mall in Austin became a college campus, 100 Oaks in Nashville transformed into a medical center, and other malls across the United States are being demolished or repurposed into housing, retail, and connecting street network to their neighborhoods. So in conclusion, the rise and fall of the American mall is not just a retail story, but a story of urban design, social behavior, and the spaces that shape our communities. Malls did not fail simply because people stopped shopping there, or because online shopping exploded, but because their form ignored the lessons of urban design. As America reimagines these sites, the next chapter of urban life is being built, one that is hopefully more connected, walkable, and feels truly public. I'm still here, by the way. I just want to say the Bears play the Packers in 2 days this Sunday, and we're not the same old Bears anymore. Bear down.